This is an interview with Tre Guertner, guitarist for Coffin Rot, on Sunday, April 11th, 2021 by Nick Burkell. Now, can you tell me about getting your very first guitar?
Actually, when I first started to play, I started on bass, and so the first guitar I ended up getting was like a Yamaha bass kit that had like all the starter pack essentials with it, like the little practice amp, DVD, tab book. Yeah, just like real cheap little setup. Once I got that, I was practicing religiously with that, like watching the instructional videos, figuring out how to write tabs. But the whole reason I got into guitar, because my buddy, one of my best friends in high school at the time, he just got a little, I think it was like an Ibanez Geo with a little rolling practice amp. And so I just really dug that sound he was getting that I wasn't getting on my bass at all, because he was showing me all these cool little techniques that you could do on guitar that you couldn't do on bass, like, the heavy palm mutes and everything. And he was just getting into metal at the time. So I thought to myself, like, well, shit, mine doesn't sound that cool. So, eventually later in the year, I convinced my parents to get me a BC Rich Virgin. I just fell in love with that thing and just practiced as hard as I could for pretty much all of high school. Was pretty antisocial, so all I did basically all of high school was just like bunker down in my bedroom, just learning all I can.
Now, did you have any private tutors, or were you enrolled in any music classes growing up?
So back in high school, I actually took a month of lessons. But basically, all I took from that was just learn how to play, like, the basic E minor, A major, D major chords, and how to do a power chord. Like, my focus I wasn't really focused on those lessons 100%, just because I wasn't like really learning anything I wanted to at the time. Eventually, I just started just learning everything I know from like YouTube, listening to bands, and just checking out tabs on ultimateguitar.com, and eventually just picked it up from there.
For you, what would you say are your three most influential albums that helped you grow as a musician?
Oh man, it's so hard to figure that out, just because I had so many phases with my music listening growing up. The three that have definitely stood the test of time, I want to say, are probably Master of Puppets from Metallica, Slayer's Reign in Blood, and Morbid Angel's Covenant. Pretty closely tied with Death's Leprosy, though. It's just so hard for me to pick those, just a top three.
Thinking back on your years as a musician, what technique are you most thankful you learned?
Probably palm muting to be very, it's just, I just always was a big fan of like that chuggy chuggy sound, but more serious note, I think best technique I probably learned was maybe just learning how to write songs that aren't in the key of the lowest string that I'm playing at the time. Because, especially with metal bands, a lot of bands tend to write songs or main riffs that are just based off that open low E. But, after learning like scales and all that in high school, I find like you can write some pretty interesting riffs if you, move around the neck. Like, for example, just play like your root note on the 3rd fret, you'll get some really cool sounds and tones from that.
Yo, man, did you know that the self-titled Rigor Mortis album, I believe that was recorded without any palm muting?
Oh, really?
Yeah, Scotchia, I believe he never palm muted on his lead, so it's just like, it definitely gave them an interesting sound.
Yeah, and like looking back at some of those older records too, back during the earlier heavy metal bands, you can tell the palm mutes weren't as defined back then. A lot of bands would kind of, they'd rest their palm on the very end of the bridge, but I don't think it was until like maybe the mid late 80s, early 90s is when bands started getting that really like, percussive sound from their palm mutes. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Now, Tre, what was it like forming Coffin Rot?
Coffin Rot basically started from just the remnants of Chemical Warfare. I ended up joining those guys after their original guitar player, Alex Stanley, left. We played together for about a year. I ended up writing one song for them, played a few shows, but I think it just kind of came down to the point, where I mean, those guys went through so many lineup changes before I joined. I was like maybe the one out of like three guitarists at that point. So eventually, it just, I don't know. For me personally, it just kind of felt like being in a cover band. It was cool, but I think all of us just wanted to start fresh, and all of us were a lot more into just bare bones knuckle dragging death metal at the time versus the kind of like death thrash influence stuff we were playing in Chemical Warfare. So it was basically just a fresh start.
Now, how often do you guys rehearse, and can you tell me a bit about the 2019 rehearsal demo that preceded A Monument to the Dead?
Basically, before COVID, we tried rehearsing at least once a week. I mean, during the Monument to the Dead sessions, we were practicing at least like once or twice a week, just getting those songs like fully rehearsed and everything, try to make it sound as tight as possible. Basically, the whole reason we came out with that 2019 demo was Sent to Rotted Life, just so they can get a scope of our sound and everything. And we were actually one of the first bands that they signed on for that. So thankfully, Jason loved that demo and decided to hook us up. So that's pretty much where that comes from.
Now, what kind of things did your band and Charlie Koryn discuss on how you envisioned the album A Monument to the Dead to come out?
At the time, we kind of wanted the album to stick out a little bit more. I mean, a lot of our contemporaries play like super kick-ass death metal, but like at the time there was a lot of the knuckle dragging caveman riff, kind of like just Death Doom inspired stuff. So we really wanted to try to push the tempo on this album. I want to say our main influences for this record were Cannibal Corpse Torture, Mortis Scold's Dying Remains, Malevolent Creation. We really just wanted to have like a really fast death metal album, kind of that resembles the first wave of Florida death metal.
What was it like composing this song, Miasma of Barbarity?
That one, besides our title track, I want to say we probably spent the most time on. It's kind of hard to explain how that song came about, because that was just like one of the ones where, I almost didn't really have to think about it. Like some of the riffs just came naturally. Of course, the way that I had originally wrote it at home is way different than how it sounds, when I brought it to the band and we changed some stuff up a bit. But, I think it sounds a lot better after we all pitched in our ideas. But no, basically for that song, personally, I just wanted that to kind of be like the one song that everyone kind of just falls back on the album. Just super punchy, super fast, has some stuff that you can mosh to and all that.
What was the original version of it like?
Basically, the original version, the riffs were pretty much all the same, except the middle of the song where the tempo slows down and kind of goes. I originally wrote that as kind of an intro riff to build up to that, that main tremolo theme that plays throughout most of the first third of the song. I can't remember if we even planned a solo for that section. I think once we ended up coming up with the finalized structure of the song, and towards the end of the song, I think Hayden brought up to me, he's like, dude, you gotta do a solo here. So that's kind of where that came from. But otherwise, the original was just super basic, super kind of like a really slow intro to just a fast part that repeated.
Now, you guys got to go out to Chicago back in 2019. Tell me the backstory on that, as well as how the show was.
I want to say the Chicago show was probably the best show that I personally played with the band. I mean, it was kind of mind-boggling. Coming from Portland, there was like just so many kick-ass contemporaries that we played with, so I always felt like we were just kind of the new kids on the block. Like, I mean, bands like Witch Vomit and Torture Rack had already been established, so, we ended up being like the fucking hundredth death metal band to come out of that scene. I feel like the response in Portland's been kind of lukewarm, which is understandable, and plus the fact that we just haven't played that many shows in our hometown. No, like Chicago, the whole show was just like super packed. We had such a huge warm welcome there. You know, people were moshing to our songs, which I was just like, what the fuck? But yeah, it was kick-ass. Mulder definitely stole the show that night. But altogether, we ended up playing 3 shows. We played first night Chicago at Reggie's, super cool venue. Then we played at I forgot the name of the bar, but it was a brewery in Indianapolis. We played with Obscene. Those guys, you know, those guys tore it up. They released a really kick-ass album the following year. Super fast shit. Detroit, I want to say, was probably the highlight for me because we ended up playing in this abandoned building, and I think the promoters ended up having to steal power from a house just down the street to be able to power up that venue. Yeah, it was an interesting night. My main highlight for that show was definitely my main highlight for that show was not really the most pleasant experience. All I can say is don't eat oceanic fish hundreds of miles from any ocean, the Midwest, in a city that doesn't have any public bathrooms around.
Good to know. Now,
we'll leave it at that.
now, what was the show like when you had Jordan Farrow of Oxen Destroyer sing on Hung and Drawn and Quartered, the cover?
That was probably my favorite show that we played in Portland. Just because, like, I'm such a big fan of Oxen Destroyer. They're one of the few death metal bands around the Pacific Northwest that just plays, like, just super fast, brutal death metal in the vein of Vader and Morbid Angel. And just having a second guitarist live, too, I felt just made it sound so much better. And Jordan, he's such a cool dude. He's such a genuine dude. I'd love to do something like that again.
What is your most cherished musical possession?
Outside my guitars, I want to say maybe just because I'm not like a huge music collector. Like I've really only started collecting CDs within like the last 5 years, but I don't know, man. Just want to say just having the physical copy of that vinyl of A Monument to the Dead, just having like our own music on physical copy, just I don't know, it just feels good.
Favorite ghost story or urban legend in Portland?
Not really knowledgeable in that subject in Portland, but there's one on the coast that is really interesting. I actually got to visit this place about a couple weeks back. I think it's Fort Stevens. Supposedly, that place has been known to have sightings of like a spectral soldier that keeps walking the grounds and has known to like give people nods from time to time. But from what it sounds like, it's just a benevolent spirit of a soldier that some people have seen in the last few decades. Like they'll see him walking down the street, give him a nod, but then once they turn around, they don't see anything. So I thought that was kind of cool to visit that place. Definitely got some eerie vibes from seeing that abandoned military fort.
Final words.
I mean, my advice to any bands right now, I mean, I know like there's some unprecedented times going on right now, but I guess just, don't stop playing, don't stop practicing, just keep at it, even if you're struggling to get together and everything because of COVID and all that. Just, I mean, we're going through the same shit with a bunch of unprecedented medical shit with, band members' families and all that, including mine. Just don't stay home, keep yourself tight. That way, when you get back together, you guys, can bunker down, really, nail all your practices.
Thanks. This has been an interview on Sunday, April 11th, 2021, with Coffin Rot guitarist Tre Guertner by Nick Burkell.
Hi, this is Trey from Coffin Rot, and you're listening to Japan Nick's Quarantine Podcast.